So basically, to make the decision on how to transcribe and what to transcribe, you need to understand that there are essentially two major approaches, two opposing views and two opposing schools or approaches when it comes to transcription. So it's not as difficult as it may seem. So these views, Oliver et al. Described these approaches as lying at the opposing ends of a continuum. So at one end there is naturalism, and at the other end there is denaturalism. So naturalism is the approach that argues that we should transcribe everything. So of course transcription should resemble the real talk as much as possible. So all the details, all the stutters, all the pauses, all the nonverbal behaviors or elements, all the ums and this kind of thing should be included in the transcription. And then denaturalism argues that the point is to convey the meaning, so the content of the conversation, but not necessarily the way that these accounts were provided. So it's more about having this clear transcription, something that is smooth and fluent, and something that can be later used for member checking, which I will come back to in a minute. So these are completely opposing views, and of course all the other approaches will lie somewhere on this continuum between this naturalism and denaturalism. And this is a very good representation of the issue of transcription, a very correct and very precise representation, because in fact this is what transcribing is about. So it's either going to be very detailed with all these elements that I mentioned, with pauses, with length of pauses, or it's not going to be that detailed. And as I'll explain in the following videos, it will essentially depend on your purpose and what you want to do with your data. But unless you're interested in some very deep conversational analysis, I would say that usually it's somewhere, your approach to transcription will lie somewhere in between these two extreme points. So usually you want to focus more on the content, not necessarily on how these words were said, how these accounts were provided, but also of course you want to provide some kind of indication. It can be in square brackets if your participant is laughing, or if your participant said something sarcastically, then you may make that note in square brackets or in brackets. So if the pause is extremely long, again, this probably may be an important thing to report. To provide an example for how your approach to transcribing may actually change the meaning, change the way the reader interprets this situation, I'll show you this short extract from Bailey. And in this extract, what happens is that a patient is talking to a doctor. And in the first extract, with this approach to transcription that fits our denaturalism, so less detail, we may have an impression that the patient in fact is happy with the doctor's recommendations. But now when the other approach to transcription was adopted, you can see that it is not so straightforward anymore. So there is shrugging shoulders, there is slapping hands, there is laughter, arguably nervous laughter. There are long pauses. So in fact I would hesitate in this second when reading this second transcription. I would hesitate. I wouldn't be so sure whether the patient in fact is satisfied with what's happening. So as you can see, even a small difference, a small change in the way we transcribe the audio data may result in a complete change in how the reader perceives this whole situation. And of course we want the data to be valid. We want the transcription to be valid, to be a valid representation of what happened in that real situation. So because the reader will have to rely on this text, that's all they will have in front of them. So it is your responsibility, of course, to make sure that your textual representation is as valid and as accurate as possible. And finally, before we move on to how to make that decision, I still have a a couple of points. I have already mentioned that it will depend on your aims, but I want to develop a little bit from this point. It is also important to note that there have been several attempts, as you can imagine, at developing some common, some standardized transcription procedures and conventions. So of course there were people who said, look, why are we supposed to be constantly confused? Why do we keep arguing, confusing ourselves, if we can simply have this one approach that will be used by everyone? But as you can imagine, there are problems with this idea. There are big problems with this idea. Some of them will be evident in what I said in the next video. So of course, depending on each individual researcher's worldviews, on the aims of a given study, the approach to transcription will be completely different. So it's not possible, it's not desirable, it's not feasible to have this one common approach. And then of course you have these different theoretical worldviews. So that's another point that you may want to remember and maybe make in your writing, because it's interesting. Of course, positivism and constructivism or interpretivism, of course these different worldviews also assume a different attitude towards transcription, or different beliefs about what constitutes a good transcription and what is transcription, in fact. So as you can imagine, positivists would say that transcription is possible, objective transcription and accurate representation is possible, and those who hold beliefs more attributed to the interpretivist tradition would probably say that it's not possible, that it's a matter of individual interpretation, so it can never be extremely objective and extremely accurate. So again, check the sources that I referred to. I will share the links or the names of these sources, so if you want to, you can also talk about transcription from the perspective of these worldviews. But in the following video I'll talk about how to decide how we want to transcribe and which approach to transcription will suit our purpose.